everyone. My name is Nora Medlin. I am a technical project manager in the Drupal space, have been for quite a few years. Today I'll be presenting maximizing project success and high-value partnerships. Before project management, I was doing software development. To be honest, I still do some software development. I every once in a while might jump in and do some Python code to scrape some data and do some transformations and wacky stuff like that. And it really helps with running reports and other things that I might need to do in my job in general. But I'm focused on project management these days. I actually act as a director of client operations at Bluefly, a new startup. A bunch of ex-Ocweans have gotten together and we're starting up a new thing. But here today, I'm sponsored by Optasi. They're a government agency out of Canada, and a government serving agency out of Canada. And they also serve higher ed and all other sort of common Drupal as well. But just a little bit about myself. I actually got my networking technology degree way back in 2006. Didn't end up doing that at all. And went into software development, like I said, and then into project management later. Got an entrepreneurship degree, innovation and entrepreneurship degree in 2017 as well. But I consider myself to be language agnostic. I will say in the Drupal community, the reason I'm here is because of that community, because it is the best open source community, right? I would say that I started out on the Linux side, and Ubuntu and user groups and all of that, but didn't get really what I wanted. So that's why I'm here with the Drupal community. We'll continue to do so for many, many years. Okay, so let's get started. I think, every project, it starts somewhere, right? Whether it's a project that's a new build or it's a strategic initiative, you're going to have to start at the beginning. So let's get started. I would say that it's really important that when you do get started, even if it's, let's say, a change order or a continuous integration or a new feature or whatever the case may be, you still need to have that business hand up. So whatever that contract says, you probably should communicate that verbally, not just on paper, to the team that's going to be executing for you. So have that meeting, decide or discuss all of the things like terms and scope and things like that. But what's really important about this sales handoff are the nuances. Maybe a new project manager is on the project, or it may be that a new dev team is on the project. It may be that even on the client side, it's a new point of contact that's involved. And so it's really important to kind of discuss some of those personality differences or those needs or those little nuances that may make a real difference moving forward. Now, I would say that I also focus a lot on next steps. It's really important to not just look behind and see how well things went in the past, but also really have a focus on that next. And it's really setting it up for this discussion that you're having. And one of the initial discussions that you would have is to just send out a notification. Hey guys, we're going to do a kickoff workshop. And give us some information. We'd like to know if you have any needs during this kickoff workshop. Do you need to take a break? We're going to expect it's going to take 3 hours for this kickoff. I know nobody likes 3 hours. No, let's not try for 3 hours. But I would say that if there is going to be a large group, right, you might want to take into consideration taking breaks, things like that. So it's important to ask those questions. And you would want to, take this moment as well to introduce any of those new leads, as I was indicating earlier. So setting this email, setting those goals, maybe do a communication plan as part of this as well. If you're familiar enough with the team, that might be possible to include. But you might not get into too much detail with this initial communication. So tell me, what do your new client, new team, new sort of kickoff emails look like? What do you use to get that conversation started? Anyone have any ideas? I've heard spreadsheets, I've heard forms, I've heard the same thing, an email.
Usually it's an email.
Yeah.
Maybe from the sales team introducing the project team.
There we go.
Like introducing the project manager, which in
like they already have a relationship and warm intro the project team.
Yep, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And then be able to run through things as a group.
Nice. I'll be honest, I usually am the one, the product manager, sending out the email sort of thing.
Yeah,
But yes, I like that. I think I might even take that back and ask my sales teams to start
exactly. It's that bridge,
doing that
the initial
email
bridge.
for the warm intro.
Mhm.
Makes sense. All right. So for the kicking off portion, these are things like making sure that we are aligning on both sides, that we're providing some sort of report on what's going on with the current state of the project, whether we're starting a rebuild or things like that. There's always kind of that place where we're starting, like I was saying before. That you'd want to, have something in there that's sensitive to inclusion and transparency of information as well. And, it's really just contracting. My point here on this slide, and I know I don't have a lot up on the screen, is that contracting and implementing to some degree, I think we've all kind of figured out. But it's those little things like, and they can become big things, like delays, overruns, missing milestones. These are all kind of the nightmare things we would try to avoid, right? So we want to set that tone initially with the kickoff. We want to solve as early as possible things like resourcing. So we want to have an idea of what our team actually will look like. Not just who the leads are, if we can. We'd really like to see what that full team looks like. So we can come into that conversation, well prepared. Now, we're not always going to have that, so it's not absolutely necessary. But you might want to include some templating in this discussion as well. Anything to do with, what kind of questions you might have initially for that client. Things like, what is the URL of your website? And do you have a GitLab repo? And, access to information. It's really kind of good to include, some of these initial talking points in your kickoff. So more specifically, during the kickoff, on the client-facing sides especially, we want to go through this kickoff with a few things in mind. I would say that those goals and what that communication plan looks like where are we communicating? Is it going to be via email only? We'd really kind of prefer oftentimes to see if we can get our clients into a Slack workspace or something like that to be able to communicate with us. Not everybody, but certain points of contact, that sort of thing, just to make communication easier. But coming to an agreement, an alignment on what that communication plan looks like. If you have it, a high-level timeline would be useful during this kickoff workshop as well. Depending upon the size of your stakeholders that are going to be in that initial kickoff workshop is, how much information or how high level you might have this information for timeline, things like that. As far as the agenda goes, I would say that icebreaker is probably one of the most important pieces of the kickoff, to be honest. It is at the point when you are giving people the opportunity to really get to know each other, get comfortable with each other, so that you can avoid problems down the road where they're just not as, don't have the tendency to potentially bring up a problem or something like that. One of the things that I like to do instead of just the standard, what is your favorite movie, or did you have a childhood character that you had a favorite childhood character? You might ask things that bring a little bit more out of a person. Something like, what would constitute a perfect day for you? Or, given the choice of anyone in the world, whom would you want as a dinner guest? I think, some of these sort of questions that kind of dig out like the personality a little bit more, gets people to really merge and meld together. During that initial kickoff, again, we want to set the tone. Some things that might be risks just to keep in mind is that if you have several stakeholders or several departments on the client side, let's say, that are getting together for the first time, there might be some conflicts that you're not aware of immediately until you get into these meetings, right? So just to be aware, that might be a risk, that might be something to think about. There might be conflicting goals in general. Not that I've really had a whole lot of problems with this, to be honest. Again, that icebreaker can really break down those walls and get people to talk to each other. And I've had the benefit, the more often than not that, oh, I've always wanted to meet you. I've heard about your department. It's really great to be on this project together, and I'm looking forward to working with you moving forward. So that's my happy moment when I see those things happen. Optionally, you might include something like meeting cadence in this call as well, especially if you have your sort of high-level point of contacts and leads on each side, and you want to maybe hash that out, initially during that kickoff workshop. But again, if it's a larger group, you might not have that conversation in the kickoff. You might have that separately. So depending upon your audience. Now, another piece on your internal kickoff, this is more like a rah-rah meeting, but it's still important to have, not just that you're meeting with the client with your leads on your side as well, but that you're having that internal kickoff with all the team members. Now, I'm not just talking about the design team, not just talking about the development team, I'm saying everybody. Now, again, if it's a very, very large team, multi-matrix, maybe you want to break this up, into separate meetings, just because if you get more than 10 people in a room, it might be difficult to manage, right? But either way, it's really important that you don't miss this step. You want not only your client team to be melding with your internal team, but you also want your internal teams to be melding with each other as soon as possible. So similar, you're going to go over the client overview, you're going to go over timeline and scope, you're going to do intros, you're going to do icebreakers if necessary, if they have never met each other. That happens a lot in agency. You'll have people that will have worked on one particular project for 8 years and never talked to someone else working on another project, and all of a sudden they're on a project together. So there may be some intros that are necessary. It's also important to define your roles, and I think it's really important not that as the project manager or the resource manager that we're telling them every single thing that they're going to be involved in. It's generally, we want to have a team, there's some skill sets involved that we've identified, that sort of thing, but it's really important for the team themselves to decide what they individually are going to be responsible for, what they agree to do. So let's, define those roles and figure that out during this kickoff, if we can. And then talk about, again, meeting cadence. I think that's even more important on the internal kickoff, to identify when are we going to meet next? What is it going to be about? Are we going to do planning sessions? Are we just going to do stand-ups? Make some of those decisions about what kind of meetings you're going to have. And even to the point of like a stand-up, should it be an async just over Slack, or should it be an actual 15-minute, in the morning type situation? Next steps, again, want to focus on. And, I think the reason I say next steps here frequently is because, again, it's good to retro and think about what happened in the past in order to apply it to the future, but that focus on next steps, leads to that success, provides that focus for the team. Speaking of roles and responsibilities, this is where you're going to tease out also, potentially, hopefully, any gaps that you might have overlooked as far as skill sets or needs, access. It could be a lot of different things, but there may be gaps that you can identify during this internal call as well. And again, if you have large teams, break this up. Do the leads first, and then break it up into the smaller, teams if you need to. I know I've been talking a lot, so bear with me. I'll have another question here coming up. But really, just keep it going. I think that it's really important to have this repetition, this cadence. People get used to a certain number of meetings that they're involved in, certain kind of meeting that they're involved in. They know what to expect, and give them time too. Don't just throw a bunch of meetings at them right away. I think it's good to kind of give them a couple days to absorb some information. They probably have other projects that they're working on too, or maybe not, but that's often the case in agency. You have people working on multiple projects. So, I do want to talk just shortly about this. If none of you have seen a RACI chart or would like to download a version of this RACI chart, you can. Here's a QR code. But it is really important to get a handle on not only on your internal teams, who's responsible for what and how much information that they should be privy to or be provided, based on what their needs are, But on the stakeholder side as well, it's really important. And you don't have to do this RACI chart every single time. The idea here is on the x-axis, you have influence from left to right, level of influence, and on the, the y-axis, and the x-axis, you have interest and availability. So the idea is that a CEO, may not need to know all of the time into the level of detail that other groups may in comparison. And if you go, have done this, many times, if you're an experienced project manager, this may just be in the back of your mind, that this is something that you would do is cater your messaging and frequency to certain parties based on how, important or detailed that they need that information. But it is, I think, good still to go through a practice of at least writing down who is responsible for what and when to contact a certain kind of person. And write it down, like on a Confluence page. I suppose it could be a document management system of some kind, but just in general, have it available for other project managers within your agency to be able to take it up and run your meetings or run your communications if you're out for a week at a conference or something, right? So just go ahead and keep that information if you can. After the kickoff, again, this is the whole next steps thing, right? It's often the case where you get into your initial kickoff with a client or internally, like, okay, team, go. But we really need to keep that momentum, right? Keep that messaging, keep that information, communication exchange happening. And a great, sort of example is just that next steps email. Like, this is what we did, recap, this is what we're going to do next. And set those times and milestones immediately, even for the small things. If you didn't include the timeline, I will mention here that it's probably a good time to include that high-level timeline on this email. You might also include some decisions that you have made since then as well. Things like, again, access. Oh, I forgot. I need to have access to that Site Studio license key for Acquia or something like that. I'm going to be building with it, so I probably should have the client's key. That might come up, something like that. Okay, now I haven't gotten into another question yet, but I did want to introduce this part, and I think it will give us some good discussion. A lot of agencies have already shifted to this discovery first model. I will admit that since I started doing this presentation. I don't know if it's me or what, but a lot of people have decided that this is really important to go this approach. Instead of just having a monolithic project where, you have I'm not talking pricing here. I'm talking just how you're managing the project. You could break up the contract, but I'm talking more phasing out the project so that you're focused on certain portions at certain times. The one thing, and we'll get into this a little bit further as I get through the slides, is that phasing out doesn't mean segregation of teams. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. But just to point out here that we're going to talk about discovery first and why it's important. Projects can easily suffer from the cart before the horse syndrome, have a smoke and mirrors sort of situation where you don't really have a whole lot of information with the contract, let's say from the sales team, and make all these promises and might not be able to deliver on them. So by breaking up it into this discovery first approach, you're setting yourself up for success where you are intentionally saying this portion of time, we are going to find out all those things as much as we can. And then we'll be able to execute a plan, recommend and plan and execute on a strategy. So let's take a quick look at a world without a discovery first approach. The flow generally here is that you might have that initial proposal and sign off. And you get signed, you're great. Okay, let's continue. Let's start designing, maybe do a POC. Figured out we need a thing. So now we need to go back and get a change order. We need, increased scope. I don't really want to have this conversation, but we're going to have it. So let's do it. Then you come back and do the design POC again, and hopefully you get to your build phase. During build, you might have some discovery that happens again. You're like, uh-oh, we found out some more stuff. Need to get another change order. Now, from an earnings standpoint, this may benefit you to some degree because you're still getting more money, but the relationship may suffer if you aren't super clear, like up front, what's happening, right? And why we're going through these different phases. So has anybody experienced just generally this sort of disaster before where you have to have this crazy conversation with the client you didn't expect you'd have to have? Yeah? No? Never? Okay. Everybody's have a perfect project. No, I saw a couple hands. So any stories, any horror stories you want to share in particular? All right. That's okay. That's all right. We don't have to. So with this discovery first approach, just to be super clear, the purpose is to have a separate engagement. If you can, contracting wise as well, I think it's really important. One tactic that I've used that's been successful here as well is to set a range for your contracting so that you have, certain range that you're going to try to hit within that particular phase as well. So there's ways to ease that from a contracting perspective. But just to go over here real quick how this might look visually, we have our requirements and envisioning phase as an example, this discovery sort of phase. We're being very intentional with this. We're going to iterate through that process with our agile methodologies and build out those things in particular that we're delivering on. And we're going to have a separate, intentional, maybe just internal, maybe just in development or staging, deploy and roll out of some kind, something that we're actually delivering, that we're demoing to the client, that they're going to be able to even maybe take with them somewhere else. That can be a good selling point, to be honest. I don't know if I want to do this phased approach agency because I, as the client, really need to, feel confident that you are going to be able to deliver the entire thing. Well, how about this? How about we give you a thing that you could potentially go and shop somewhere else and get the rest of it done? How does that sound? You're not sure about us? Try us out. 9 times out of 10, they're going to love that and they're going to stay with you. They're going to continue on. So let's take a closer look at this phased approach. Just in general, that what we're talking about here is kind of breaking up into deliverables. We might have a needs sort of deliverable, a POC, a proof of concept deliverable, maybe something like a prototyping and or technical approach. Now, this is usually where I would break it. Like, I think I would kind of group the first phase, the first envisioning and or discovery phase into either needs and POC, or maybe also one of these two, a prototype, and I'm talking a design prototype, and a technical approach. So by, kind of grouping these sort of deliverables together, large high-level deliverables, you can really provide them with that value that I'm talking about. Eventually, you're going to get into your other deliverables like full design. You're going to get into the full implementation, the testing, and the launch. But as just kind of giving you an idea of how it builds, one thing builds on the other. And you can really think of this as a separate strategic initiative, could be this entire sort of process, could be a rebuild, could be a redesign that could be visualized this way as well. But if you think about, trying to break up your sort of large epic feature sets in this way, I think you can deliver a lot of value to your clients. So just to, oh goodness, where was I? Here we go. So just to reiterate here on, this phased approach that we're talking about being really intentional about those specific deliverables. Let's say that we have this one in particular, not that we would necessarily just focus on the one deliverable, but just for visualization purposes, let's say we have this one deliverable and we're wanting to make sure to iterate through on that deliverable and get to the end of our phase, by iteration through that process. And what I mean and why I'm emphasizing this iteration piece is because it's important that you have some checkpoints that are happening throughout your phase as well. But it's not just about, toss it over the fence and let's get it back to the client at the very end, that you're also involving them at each part or each end of each sprint to give them a demo, to make sure that they're checking in with you, that they're doing UAT. I think I've seen a lot of times UAT doesn't happen until the end. Why not have them UAT some things early? You could do POC UATs. You could do your high-level prototyping UAT. And so it kind of breaks it up, lets the people on your teams incorporate those things early in the process as well. You still want to keep an eye on scope and all of that, but those can be opportunities. If you have something that's out of scope, don't think of it as we can't do that. We absolutely can do that in the next phase, potentially. Let's talk about that. But let's focus on this right now. So this is the question that I was waiting for. Has anyone worked with a multi-phased approach before? I'd hope I'd see a lot more hands in this camp at this point in the year. Good. I had about 25% probably earlier in the year and last year, and now I'm getting more 50%. So it's good to see that phased approach is being adopted. I think it works really well, and I'm hearing lots of great stories out of it as well. Just not only for the client and the success of the project, but those partnerships I think are growing and building because we're being more transparent and breaking things up in this way. I do want to give a quick word about my sponsor, my sponsor Optasi. Again, they're a Canadian Drupal development company. They're out of Oakville, Greater Toronto area. They focus on strategic initiatives that include discovery, design, build, deployment. So a lot of the things that I talked about here today, leveraging support and continued alignment in their re-business mechanism, as they say. Some of the Optasi clients you can see here as well, quite a few. And the experience, in general, that with over 19 years of experience and 30 certified Drupal developers, they're empowering organizations to achieve success. So definitely one that you might think about if you especially are looking for any Canadian partners. Let's make sure on time here real quick. I think we're still good. Okay, so yes, I'll take a couple minutes here to talk about avoiding burnout. I think that that's an issue that we still struggle with, especially, that we're having lots of reductions in force happening across the board. Everybody's having to do a lot more with a lot less. So let's talk about that a little bit. Cadence and ceremonies are really important. I think as a project manager or an agency, there's a tendency to only do the ceremonies that are thought to be absolutely necessary. So things like a stand-up or a sync with the client, those things always kind of stick around. But other things are equally, if not to some degree, more important. So not only do you need to figure out your frequency and saturation. So when I say stand-up, I'll be honest with you, I think people take the stand-up and use it for other things. Maybe you don't actually need to do a daily stand-up. Maybe your project team is working on, again, multiple projects across the week, that sort of thing. So you might only meet during the first half of the week with your team and have them work on your project for the first 2 or 3 days, something like that. So do your stand-ups then. That makes sense, right? Why stand up if you're not going to have any progress to talk about? So yeah, figure out your frequency and saturation. That's going to be important. But really in your sprinting, you want to make sure that you are doing these other things. And you don't have to include the entire team. It could be just the leads, right? So you have a dev lead, design lead, something like that would be involved in estimation and placement, and be intentional about it. It doesn't necessarily need to be a meeting, an actual Zoom meeting per se to hash all this out. Though it could be good to at least meet for 15 minutes to kind of set the stage. Okay, guys, these are the ones that we want to do today. This is our focus today, is to go through this estimation piece and or placement in the sprint. So a planning session, more or less. Then you have your stand-ups that I talked about already. But here, honestly, the demos portion, I'm talking internal demos, by the way. I'm not talking about the client demos. I don't think we do internal demos enough. We should do them all the time, every sprint,
Right.
every week.
Right.
Some talk about it. And this is where you can really break down those walls between the design and dev teams, for instance. You want to have your leads involved in these demos, if nothing else. They're going to be there to see what the design team is thinking about. And they'll be able to say, hey, I wonder if that's really going to work with this responsive requirement that we have. Do we have breakpoints? Have we thought about that? It's kind of along those lines, right? So yes, please do demos, do lots of demos, and encourage your team to do the demos on their own too. You don't have to necessarily facilitate, but just kind of try to encourage this culture of sharing, right? So encourage that. Equally, almost, and somewhat more important to some degree, is those retrospectives as well. This doesn't have to take an hour and a half, by the way. It can take 15 minutes. You can have your people get on a board, spreadsheet, be the 4Ls, could be whatever kind of retro format that you really love. Could be a mural board with cards, however it is. But give them 5 minutes to fill out individually what they think went well, didn't go well, could have done better, right? Maybe even give them a card for what they think, actionably could be done to change things, to make things better for them or for the team or for the client, whatever. And then you group them. So you group them into categories. It might be access stuff or React stuff or Drupal specific stuff or whatever the case may be. And then you vote on it. Okay, let's do the stars. Let's vote on which category we want to talk about today. And these things all take, in the span of 10, 15 minutes. We're voting, we're talking, we're getting through it. And people are heard. That's a really important part of retros, right? They feel valued with the stuff that they're talking about. And really, again, this is the next steps thing. You want to apply or identify areas of improvement, actionable items that you can take into the next sprint. And most of the time, it's things that will make the team more efficient. But a lot of times, you'll tease out some things that are going to make that relationship with your client better or something like that. I didn't really like how we were presenting this thing last time. Can we think about doing it a little bit differently this time or next time? I had a note here about internal meeting time. Oh, I had a note here at the end, and I might as well mention it here too. It is important that when you're thinking about all these meetings, that you're actually including that time that you estimate that you will take on your contracts. I think I see that a lot where we shortcut our teams and then they feel pressured when it comes to actually doing these meetings because they don't have the time on the timesheet in order to spend on it, right? They don't want to take away from development time or design time. So, and a general target, I'll usually target 25% of whatever that overall estimate is for the implementation towards, plus the QA time as well, because you want to kind of separately do the QA. But after all that, 25% is going to be towards meetings, to be honest with you.
Internal and external?
Internal, external, yeah, it should cover everything. Yeah. You're not always going to get that out of your contracts, right?
Yeah.
But you could try. You can put it in there and you can justify it, right? And as you build your relationships with your clients, they'll see the value in it too.
Mm-hmm.
So what ceremonies do you use or plan on using? That I heard demo, a little holler for demo. So any other, do you guys do a lot of retros? Maybe you'll increase the number of retros every sprint, something like that? Any other ones?
We definitely try to do as many demos as possible. We tend to make them client facing. So the idea that you suggest of making them entirely internal is killing.
Well, not entirely. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to.
No,
yeah.
I'm just, yeah.
Okay.
Including some
Including,
entirely that are entirely internal.
Oh,
in
yes.
addition to the ones
Exclusive.
that-
There. Yes, both. But yes, some that are exclusively internal.
Yeah, the struggle that we always have is that know that's gonna take time. And so we need to put those into the budget. We frequently get feedback on the sales side, as people on that team say, gotta cut in order to get this thing in the door in the first place. So
Mhm.
it's not a zero cost option, even if it does wind up avoiding cost overruns because it improves the QA process or makes the client. You know what I'm saying? It's like, it's a fraught decision to include that additional time.
It's a culture shift. It really is. It's something that you kind of have to prove to your internal sales teams as well. Absolutely. I mean, I think that'll come with time, and you know, if you can show them on the back end, I think one strategy I've used is to say, this is all the time, sales team, that we ended up spending on this that we could have spent on, you know, this is like sort of high level leadership retros, and saying, you know, if we could have gotten paid for this. And I understand you're trying to sell things, but this is actual value that the client understands. So why are we not, like, let's think about this more strongly. I don't know. I mean, I'm really passionate about it. So I push for it really hard. And so I hope that more sales teams will decide to include that.
Yeah, and I think that like the key obviously is that alignment and showing them the value along the way so that you don't surprise them at the end and find that there's a discrepancy. But I am curious, so with the estimations that your team puts forth or that you put forth, do the demos come out of that meeting time or do they come out of the development task time?
Meeting time.
Meeting time, okay.
Yeah, yeah, it's a meeting.
Nice.
So makes sense to me anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you can't anticipate all things, you know, so it may affect it. Like if you're not facilitating this is usually kind of covering just like what you're facilitating as a project manager, sort of intentional meetings that you're setting aside every sprint. You can calculate for that. And that's how that 25% comes out. So yes, I think that there is going to be times where the development team members are going to have something that they need to jump on a call to co-pair program type. That's development time.
Yes.
That's clear to me, and it's development time. But
That makes sense.
technically it's down, I guess. So I just
Yeah.
want to make that
Or an
differentiation
internal
for you.
meeting.
Sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
okay.
Yeah,
That's
but those are more
interesting.
ad hoc, and you know, so probably I would count those as development time.
Cool.
Yeah. Thank you. No problem. Okay. Last little bit, if we have a couple minutes here still. I do apologize. It should have said tools. I don't know why it says cadence and ceremony. It is important that, maybe I just totally did this wrong. No, I got this right. I'm sorry. Just the top part's wrong and it threw me off. So one thing to know or to think about also is your tools and your internal processes to help your team manage their time. So one way as a project manager, I've actually helped my team with this is to just literally share what my process is. So on my calendar, I will color code everything. I'll have like different clients set to different colors or something like that. Or so I'll kind of like show them like how much time I'm actually putting into planning my day, planning my week, so I can stay focused on certain things. So something like as simple as that can help your team members figure out how to manage their time a little bit more effectively as well. So thinking about time management to plan your focus time, like I said, color coding. And one note here to do with that as well is I've found there's some tools that will kind of help you to do your time tracking as well if you do this. For instance, oh goodness, now I'm drawing a blank on what the exact tool is called. I think I might have it farther down here. Tempo. So in Jira, there's a plugin called Tempo. It's a separate service type deal, but you more or less can write your ticket Jira number like in your calendar, and effectively it will automatically log into the Tempo time tracker that time that you spent with that focus block. So, there's some automations and integrations in reference to that as well that you can help to manage your time. Make sure to leave room for breaks. That was the other piece that I wanted to mention here as well, is that it's not just about like blocking off your time, but you need to really, do that self-care and think about like, maybe you need to take a 15-minute and walk around the building between this meeting or before that meeting or between this focus time and that focus time. Another bit here to do with project organization, just high level. I don't like to get into too much methodology because there's a lot of them going around, but just generally breaking things up into epics, stories, tasks, bugs, having a type of a thing, labeling, that sort of thing, tagging. Tagging specifically, I found like it's really useful to have a tag for something like needs discussion, just so that I can, pull up a list of all of those things that I need to talk about with the internal team or the client team or something like that. So leverage your tagging. You might in Jira specifically leverage components. It's not as great as I would love it to be, but it can be helpful as another level of tagging. Due dates. I would suggest that you limit the usage of due dates in your project management tool. That you only set them when you have hard deadlines. Because it can be really distracting or stressful, I think, honestly, to have like due dates on everything that you not only have to enter, but that other people, your team members are actually seeing every time that they go and do something. So really just do the hard limit deadlines, due dates. Beyond that, actually, I'm sorry, one other thing with the project organization. Swim lanes. It's a good idea to consider specifically a separate board per audience. So everybody, like with the RACI chart I was talking about, everybody's going to want a different level of detail. And so similarly, you might have a board that's just the stories that you would be going through with the client, for instance. Or you might have a board that's just for the developers, that's just those things that are assigned over to the developer team, or a particular deliverable. So, think about like kind of changing your boards or creating multiple boards for different purposes. Dashboarding is really helpful as well. If you are using something like Jira and Confluence, you can do widgets and things and kind of make the reporting a little bit easier week over week, put less labor on yourself that way. And really, the last bit here is that overview page that I was kind of alluding to earlier, having those really basic things. I found in Slack, honestly, I've used that a lot more with the Canvas in Slack feature, where you just put like the basic stuff, like the sites, environments, GitHub repo, any links to contracts if people want to see that. Usually it's a good idea to just have it there. Any points of contact, and or what they're responsible for on both sides as well. Just having a central location for all of that really helps not only your project team, but other teams that might come on and off the project during the duration of the project. Strategic initiatives might be another thing you add, but usually get that from your project boards, so that's not absolutely necessary. For personal sort of tools that you can use as well, you might think about things like organizing your browser tabs. I know this is a feature probably everybody uses now, but I remember earlier in the year, not everybody knew about it. So did you know you can group your tabs and put a name on it and a color on it and even hide it, for later or whatever. So use your browser tab organization. Every browser has it. Integrations I was talking about to do with Tempo as an example, but there's other ones like Slack to Jira. So you can create Jira tickets from a conversation out of Slack or things like that. Think about some integrations that might be helpful. Status automation specifically, and I use Slack a lot, so this is like where this is all coming from, to be honest. But there's a couple apps out there. One of them is called Reclaim AI. The other one's called Don't Interrupt .app, and I can tell you about that after the call if you're really interested. But the idea is that it's more than just the basic where you have a meeting and it shows up on your Slack that you're in a meeting. You can set like what the thing is that you're doing. You can have the information about the title of the meeting in there, things like that, and other sort of rules that you could set with those apps. And last but not least, I will say that the zero inbox method, honestly, I still use it to this day. Just do it. respond or remind. That's all you have to think about. Like, do you need to do it right now, or do you need to remind yourself to do it later? And it will clear off your desk and open up your mind, and it's a beautiful thing. Please practice inbox zero if you can. Any other tips and tools that you've used for avoiding burnout is really what this whole section was about. I know I went through it quite a lot. Trello, okay. What else? Sorry? Drupal?
We haven't really talked about documenting the process, but I'm a big fan of kind of documenting everything going, like, we're gonna run a demo, like, kind of documenting that that's happening and what's going on with the demo. So I'm kind of a fan of like making technical documents as a content type within Drupal that helps you eat your own dog food and use the system while you're building the system. So then at the end, you kind of have a history of what was decided in the project, but you also have the start of your documentation, kind of. You have a corpus for AI to answer questions. But coming back to the demo piece, if the demo time that you spend doing demos internally, if things go well, that demo leads to the work is kind of like 50% done because you've already done it in POC or demo. And you've also documented pieces of it kind of within as the pro. So that using Drupal to build Drupal is something I'm trying to push to people internally.
I love it.
That's kind of my thing. Like technical information document the project as you move it forward, and then you'll have the info. Because I run a small team, so if one person drops away, then what are you left with? So you have to document that process, and so that's what I know.
Yeah. No, it's great. I've seen quite a few agencies. One other that has also, created their own sales pipeline, more or less, or contact lists. It's almost like a CRM/sales pipeline situation in Drupal. So it's like anything, don't just use all these other tools that I mentioned, right? You can just use Drupal to build all of these processes and tools that you need. So I thank you for that. I think you might have had another.
Yeah, I did. I use Jira and Tempo as project manager, and I often want to create dashboards that I can't necessarily create in Tempo or in Jira or even in Confluence. So there is a extension that you can, or like an app that you can add on to Google Sheets, the Jira to Sheets integration.
There you go.
And it literally will pull in your issue information based on a query.
And you can pivot table to your.
You can do whatever you want.
Whatever you want.
Yeah, and the only downside I have seen with it is that when you're pulling in Tempo data, it does not pull in the actual user's ID. It basically redacts that on the import. So you lose that layer, but you can pull the high level info, which is wonderful. It saved me hours and hours.
Yeah, it's ironically interesting to me that how going back to spreadsheets is often the case, that solves the problem, right? So what works? Anybody else have a tool? Yes.
You reminded me of something that our team is working on, excited about, which is the opposite. We do all of our budgets in Google Sheets, and traditionally our project managers have wasted enormous amounts of time taking each budget line item from the sheet and pasting it into GitHub tickets that then represent what the developers, or the whole team needs to do. Usually it's developers. So our team recently built a thing that it's a Drupal module that connects to Sheets, pulls out each line item, and then connects to GitHub and creates a ticket for each line item.
I mean,
It's really avoided some.
That's great.
Project manager.
You have a module for that you're sharing with the community?
Since you have this.
Oh, yeah, do it. Yeah, I think a lot of people probably would love it. So
yeah.
please. Okay, any other tools? I did want to maybe go over a couple other slides real quick before I know that we're over on time, so I just wanted to make sure to talk about other things that I'm involved in. If you or know anybody that you know that is looking for a new opportunity, I have been involved in layoffs in the last couple of years, and that's plural, layoffs. So I intimately know what it means to get something new, and I've been doing consulting prior many years. So I built this digital career sandbox. It's a place for us to get together, talk about job opportunities, network support. I run a Monday mess every Monday. I alternate between morning and afternoon, well, Central Time anyway. And so check it out. I'm on Facebook. LinkedIn, excuse me. And it's a group, it's a page, it's a website. I have a jobs list. There's all sorts of things going on there. So take a look and or recommend someone. I'm also the lead organizer for MidCamp, which is coming up in 2025 in May. And I think this might be the first camp on recording that I will be able to announce that Dries will be there. Yes. We're going to have a fireside chat with him, and he's going to spend some time with us in our little camp over in Chicago. So please consider coming to MidCamp in Chicago in May. Also, if you are looking to volunteer, we're always looking for people to help organize. One last thing about me, if you'd like to take a QR code shot of that to find me and talk to me, and I'm Technora everywhere, basically, too. Thank you, everyone. Wonderful. I really appreciated all the participation today, so thank you very much.